Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stoneridge Connect 2025 and the session Set Up Notifications Using Power Automate. The title is a little bit of a misnomer. We're going to be, setting up notifications, but we're going to be using that kind of trope and common need for process to build your skills. This is really designed for beginners of Power Automate. We're going to be looking at three different levels of process to build. We're going to be using the notification from using CE triggers from the Dynamics 365 CE system to walk through how to build out, starting very simple and then adding building blocks that you will need that you're going to apply to pretty much every Power Automate flow that you build going forward. So let's take a look at the agenda. I'll be doing an introduction in a second here. I'll be presenting you with some helpful tools that you can use and might need as you are building out your Power Automate processes, especially when you get into a little bit more complicated Power Automate processes. I'm going to give you some tips and some resources that you can use that are going to help you on your journey and just give you an idea of what to expect when you're building these out for the first time. Then we're going to look at those three levels of complexity, those three processes that I mentioned at the top of this, looking at the processes themselves as well as the result of those processes after they run. And then we're going to recap everything. We're going to bring it all back together so that everything that we talked about in the tips and resources that may not mean a whole lot to you when I mentioned it the first time, once we look at the processes and we talk a little bit more about those, we're going to circle back and recap those, and those will make more sense when we do that recap. So onward we go. My name is Drew Weaver. I'm a senior CE functional consultant at Stoneridge. I've been here for about 2 years, but I've been working in CE support for 11 years now. And man, I just love Power Automate. I love building processes. It's a great way to engage your mind in problem solve, and it's fun. They're fun to troubleshoot. Just everything about them is just great. I love it, and I love teaching people about Power Automate. So that's what we're going to do today. Starting with some helpful tools. So there are some tools within the XRM toolbox. We use this in the CE world quite a bit. This is a toolkit that has some plugins developed through third parties that kind of give you functionality that you don't necessarily have out of the box. There's one in particular that we use a fair amount in the Power Automate world, which is the Fetch XML builder, where you can put in Fetch XML. You can get this from a view in CE. You could just download that code directly. You feed it into that Fetch XML tool, and it will provide you with the exact outputs that you will need to copy and paste right into your Power Automate process and actions. The next thing that is invaluable that we use, pretty much every single time that we build out Power Automate processes, is going to be a robust text editor like Notepad++ or Visual Studio. The third tool that I'm going to reference is the reference guide to flow expressions. We'll talk a little bit later about what expressions are, when you can use them, what they can do, that kind of thing. But that link there will give you all of the expressions that are available in Power Automate, as well as what each expression is expecting as far as input from our side as the flow builder to allow it to run properly and do the thing that we need it to do. So that will be very helpful as you build out, again, more complicated Power Automate processes. But next, let's go and talk about tips and resources. Again, we'll circle back around to these at the end. They're going to make a lot more sense once we look at the processes and have a little bit more experience under our belt. But the first thing is key. It's having a good understanding of the data structure that you're working with, knowing what information and data you're going to be using from the tables that you pull, knowing how the different tables relate to one another. That's going to help guide you into which actions you will need to take in which situations. So just having a baseline understanding of your database and your data structure is going to be key to help you out and get you to where you need to go, and let you know, kind of plan out ahead of time, where do I need to go with this process. The second one is, and I promise you, this is not me being pessimistic. This is after plenty of experience. Assume your first build attempt will fail. Completely normal, completely, frankly, expected. This is what testing is for, and we'll talk about testing a little bit later in these tips and resources here. Your first build will fail, but every failure, I promise you, you will learn something. So plan on that failure, but fail in sandbox, right? Fail in sandbox, that's where it's proper to fail. But every time you fail, I promise you, you will learn something more. You will gain new information about Power Automate, how it works, how it doesn't work, which is also key, because that will help you troubleshoot things later down the road when maybe others are building things out and they encounter issues. You can say, oh yeah, I ran into that roadblock before. This is how I got around it. So failure is not even just expected, but in some sense desired. So go in with that attitude and everything will be a-okay. Third one, use the error messages and outputs from those failures to help in your troubleshooting. The outputs and the error messages are actually very, very useful and very, very good at directing you to exactly what is wrong. So again, that's why I'm saying don't be afraid of that failure. Those failures are going to direct you into learning what is wrong, what the process is expecting, and you're going to gain that knowledge by doing that troubleshooting. So fail early, fail often, but fail in sandbox, right? Okay, this is one. The next one is going to be one that we will need to probably circle back on, and it's going to make a lot more sense as we go along when we look at the processes, and that is to rename the actions that you're adding to your Power Automate process as you go along. So action names are used in downstream, so later actions. You will be referencing earlier actions by their name. So every name has to be unique, and it's a lot easier to get the information you're wanting to get and you're expecting to get when you have clearly named each of your steps and stated what that step is doing, so that you're not just looking for, okay, I'm needing to get this piece of information from a very specific step, but all I see are list rows 2, list rows 3, list rows 4. It's very difficult to know what those steps are doing, what tables are pulling from, when you aren't defining in that action name what that step is doing. So help yourself out, take a few seconds as you're adding the action, rename it to say this is exactly what this step is doing. As you reference that back in later actions, you're going to be patting yourself on the back for just spending that little bit of extra time to make things a lot clearer for you, and doing yourself that favor. Test early, test often. This is a general rule for building out any kind of anything in the system, but especially in Power Automate. Every few steps I add, I'm usually going back and doing some tests. Am I succeeding? Is it succeeding with the steps I have and actions I have so far? And if you're doing that testing as you go along, you're going to be saving yourself a lot of time, especially as you're building more complicated flows and Power Automate processes, to know that, okay, well, I've tested steps 1 through 13, so I know it's not an issue in any of those steps. So it must be, if I've got 16 steps now, it's got to be in 14, 15, or 16 where those errors are lying. And because I know everything above that is working because I've tested it. And finally, if you have complex functionality that may come later in the process, or if there's a section that's going to be a little bit more complicated, don't be afraid to just kind of pull that section out and think about that and create its own separate sort of proof of concept process first, so that going in, okay, is the way I'm thinking about this correct? The way I build it, is it getting me the information I need to then insert back into my main process. So it basically allows you to not sort of mess with the actions you have so far built in your primary process. It allows you to just take that section, the more complex thing, test it out, make sure it's going to work, and then take your knowledge from that build out and bring it back into your main flow. And again, if you have update steps, if you have things changing in that main flow, we don't have to worry about those. We can just fixate on that complicated section and then bring that knowledge back to the main section and then test it once it's back in that main section. So doing all that is going to really help you move forward and effectively and efficiently not only build out your processes. Okay, so now let's switch over to our process, our 3 levels of process. So let me jump over to our other screen here, and we are looking at a simple opportunity that has been won, and that is what my notification is going to be about. When an opportunity is won, we want to send out a notification to a particular group of users in the system. I've got them added as a queue in the system for our most basic level. So all we want to do at our level 1 process, very simple. We aren't going to have any branching logic. We're not going to add any variables yet or have any expressions. We'll talk a little bit about more what all that stuff is in our later levels. We're just going to have a trigger and then only the relevant actions that are required for this process. Very, very simple. It's going to be 3 steps. Okay, so the trigger again is when an opportunity is won. We want to send an email with some basic information in it to our queue. So let's jump over to our level 1 process here that I've got queued up. And this is our edit screen. And this is the old style. I'm going to be showing you both the old style of the editor and the new style so you kind of get your feet wet with both and understand how things have changed between the old style and the new style. Right now, I would recommend you use the new style, but it is kind of a preference or taste right now as far as which you prefer. Okay, so looking at this, like I said, this is our simplest one. It's 3 steps. First is our trigger step. And you can see that I've left the main name of the step. So I've got a Dataverse step, and I went and I added for the trigger when a row is added, modified, or deleted. And then I've added my unique bit, which is it triggers when an opportunity is won. So what does that look like? First of all, we want the change type to just be modified, right? We don't want it firing on create because we don't need it to. We're not going to be creating and automatically winning an opportunity. An opportunity is a process. There are things that take time and things that are needed as part of that process. So it will only trigger when something is modified. And what table are we looking at? We're going to be looking at the opportunities table. So I've selected opportunities in the table name field. Scope. Generally speaking, you're pretty much always going to be doing organization. The other options are business unit, paired child business unit, and user. You may find some uses for these other ones where we only want a process to run for a particular business unit, especially if you have sort of a more siloed system and multiple different departments that we don't want data crossover or process crossover. You might use those other ones, but generally speaking, you're probably going to be okay if you default it to organization-wide. Select columns. So select columns in the case of a trigger, the Dataverse trigger, that is telling us when we have a modified change type, what columns should change, or are we what columns are we monitoring for change to trigger this process? If we were to leave this blank, that would trigger, it would make this process trigger on any change of that opportunity whatsoever. We certainly don't want that. So especially when you have a modified change type, you're always going to be setting a column or several columns. You might have it valid to fire on a couple of different columns. You would add those schema names of those columns separated by commas. And then you always also want to have a filter to say, okay, on the change of the status code, that is the status reason field, that's the scheming of the status reason field on an opportunity. And so when that changes, we want that change specifically, we want this to trigger when that change equals 3. And you can look at your the integer values of your status reason to find which one you want. 3 in this case equals 1. So in this, again, recap, when the status code of an opportunity changes to 1, this process will trigger. Okay, and what is this process going to do? First, we're going to add a new row, and that row is going to be an email message. The way this works in Dataverse is we first create the email record, and then we have an action that sends it out from the system. So we're just adding who's the from. The from is going to be the system user, who is the owner of that record. In this case, it is my user. The next thing is the to. I mentioned this already. We've got a set group of people that are all part of a queue that we're going to send this to. So we've added the GUID of that record, that queue. So the people on that queue will receive this email message. What else do we have? If I expand the show advanced options there, it's going to open up all of the rest of these fields in the old school, in the old style formatting. And we can scroll down and we can see what else we have. The description, very simple. Hello team, we've won again. We've got some information that's included in the body there. Very simple stuff. And then we also have it setting the regarding to that opportunity. So again, we've got the pluralized name of the table, and then we have the GUID of the opportunity. That's how you set lookup values in a Power Automate flow using Dataverse. And then we've got the subject, celebrate another sales win, level 1. So we know which one we are looking at. And then there's that perform a bound action. We're sending out the email. Again, this is really only for if you're using Dataverse, which is Dynamics 365 CE, you'll have that extra send this email out action right there. And you would just go, you'd say perform a bound action, select email messages in your table. Action name, there's going to be just a set handful of actions you can take. In this case, we're going to send it out. We are providing the GUID of the email from this step above. Again, if we hover over that, we can see the outputs and then the name of that action step. Remember when I said to, hey, be sure to rename your actions as you go along? This is why, because it refers to that action step and then the field of that step. And then we say issue the send. And what does that look like as a level 1 email? Pretty simple. It looks fine, right? It looks fine. It gets the job done. It gives us some information about the opportunity that's been won. It's sent out to the group we want to send out to. It's a little ugly, but you could add some formatting in that description field that we looked at for the email body. If you apply some simple HTML formatting to that to give bold tags to some areas and break page or line breaks to some areas, it's going to look a little bit better. We are going to go into that, but it's fairly simple HTML that you could look at doing and adding and making this look a little bit nicer, which is probably what you want to do. Internally, usually okay to make it look a little not as great, especially when you're sending notifications externally, though. You want to make it look better than what we've got going on here. But we're keeping it simple, so it gets the job done. Okay, that is level 1. So that's without any branching logic. That's without any other bells and whistles or anything like that. So let's take it up a notch. Let's go back to our opportunity, and I'll draw your attention to this opportunity type field right here. So we have 2 types of opportunities in our case, products only and services only. And for our purposes, we're just going to assume they don't overlap. They won't ever overlap. It's only ever going to be products only or services only. Okay, so I've created a process here, level 2, that factors that in. Okay, and now you can see we're looking at the new style here. It looks very different, but all the information is still there that we looked at before. It's just more over here in this left-hand pane. So when I click on this trigger step, I've got this pane over here that opens up that has all that same information, except for, I'll draw your attention to this addition to our filter. So we're still triggering when the opportunity is marked as won by going and saying status code equals 3. But we've added another one with an AND connector for that opportunity type field here. Okay. And what we're saying is we want that to not equal, or NE, not equal, null, which means we don't want it to be blank. So it's another way of saying this is that opportunity code field must contain data, right? So has to be a won opportunity, and that field must contain data. That's our trigger. So now we can use the data from that opportunity type code and check it to see, hey, what is that value equal to? And so you can see that I've got just an integer here. I'm looking at my opportunity type code, but I'm not using products only. I've got an integer. Where is that coming from? Okay. Well, let's walk through that very quickly. So if you go into your solution, let's go into your default solution in your make.powerapps.com area and the environment that you're working in. We're looking at opportunities. So I navigated to opportunities. I'm looking at the columns. What column am I looking at? That opportunity type column that we looked at on the record. And if we go and look at the choices on there, I'm going to click that edit choice button. Here's what we're looking at. So we've got products only. That equals that integer right there. Services only equals this integer right here. So because I only have 2 values here, only 2 options, what I can do in my process is just check one. Hey, is this products only? If it's not products only, we've already established in our trigger that it must contain data. So if it's not products only, the only other data it could be is services only. So true, our true branch is if it's products only. Our false branch is if it is services only in this case. And so then we're just doing the exact same thing in this step to create the email. I'm going in, and in fact, we're doing, we're doing one additional thing. So because we're going to our products side, I'm also going to, in addition to having the sender and the main recipient, I'm also going to add a CC, which is this activity party 3 here. And I'm going to add our system user who's in charge of our product support. So I'm going to add that person. If I were to look at the other side here, if it was services only, we've got just a placeholder value for that user. But we would have a GUID of the user that is in charge of the services side of support on this side, right? So now let's look at what that email looks like in the system. So I'm going to open our level 2 record. Again, all the information is going to look the same here, but we've added our product support team member to our CC area here. So we've added that branch to say, okay, this needs to go to the main team, but also needs to inform someone from our product support side that something might be coming down the line later on. And so we've inserted our product support person in here with that branching logic. Okay, so that is our level 2 of it. And let me just, before we move on to level 3, let me walk you through here. You might have noticed that we're kind of adding some extra work for ourselves as we're branching, in the sense that we've got kind of the same stuff going on here. The only difference on these 2 sides is this person right here, the CC individual. That's the only difference. So I've basically doubled the amount of work that I've put into this process by dividing it up, right? And having this structure and having all the steps in both of those branches. Now, picture it when there might be 6 options. You might use a switch that's similar to a conditional logic here, but it has many different options rather than just the 2, right? So that can be even more work. You might be multiplying your work by 6 times or 7 times or 8 times, right? So level 3 is going to help us simplify our work structure here and make it a little bit more streamlined, a little easier to build and save us time in the long run here. So let's look at our level 3 process that is going to include branching again, but we're also going to use variables, and we're going to include an expression in our process here. Okay, so we've got, again, the exact same, this is the exact same trigger as our level 2. We still have that triggering on the change of the status, and the opportunity type code has to have a value there. But now we are initializing a variable. And what that means is I'm saying, hey, I'm going to be using this as a placeholder down the line. So I want this to be a string that's also just a line of text. And right now I don't have a default value that I want to set here. You may have a value that you set right away. In this case, I'm kind of waiting to see what I need to do down the line. So I'm not going to have a default value here. So you just basically need a name. What type is it? Those are the different types. So you might have numerical ones like integer, float. Boolean is yes, no, or on, off, true, false. Object or an array is going to be kind of a stack of information. We won't worry about those too much right now because those can get a little more complicated as we go along. So we're trying to keep it fairly simple right now. So now I've initialized my variable, and instead now in our true or false action, so again, we're just looking to say, hey, is this products only or not? Instead of having 2 steps in that true and 2 steps in the false, I have 1. And all I'm doing is setting the value to the GUID of the users that should receive that email. Then I can use that newly set variable in my email creation step. And I've done that right here. I'm CCing a system user, and I'm just putting that kind of placeholder that I've set in my steps above here in the parentheses. So it's going to be sending to the whichever user whose side it went down. And then we only have 1 send action. So again, imagine this being multiple different option set values, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever. You could just add 1 step each instead of 2 each and a bunch of other information for each of those steps. Or you can use a variable and just set it right there. Okay, so that's variables. It's going to save you time. It's going to make your process more streamlined. That's why you want to use variables when relevant, right? The other thing that we've done here is I've added, hey, well, actually, we probably want to inform the team that we need the customer onboarded by a certain date. And we're going to say that date is 7 days after the opportunity has closed. So to do that, what we've done, if I hover over this, you can kind of see what we've done. I'm going to use Notepad++. Again, that's one of those tools I mentioned at the beginning to show you what we're actually doing in here. Now, an expression is basically just a tool that does a very specific job. So think of, and it needs parameters sometimes to get that job done. So think of hanging a picture on a wall, right? So to hang a picture on the wall, what do we need? We need a hammer, we need a nail, we need a picture itself, and we probably need a level to level it out and make sure it looks good, right? So in this case, the expression is, what are we doing? We're hanging a picture on the wall, right? And the parameters are, what tools do we need, in this case, what information do we need to be able to complete that task? And you'll have to forgive expressions. They don't have eyes, they don't really have a brain, they just do one thing. So the only thing they ask from us is, these are the tools I need, but I need them in this specific order. So, first hand me the hammer, then hand me the nail, then hand me the picture, and then hand me the level. And then I will be able to complete my task knowing that each of those items is in its correct space. So in this case, for our expression add days, what it's asking from us, and we can look at that link that I shared before of all the expressions. It will detail what everything it's expecting. But walking you through it, the first thing it's expecting is, okay, what is the time we're starting from? Okay? And so the first time we're starting from is the actual close date from our triggering step. So you can see trigger outputs. We're looking at the body of that output and the actual close date. That's where we're starting. Okay. The next thing it's asking for, separated by a comma, is how many days are we adding to our start date? In this case, we're adding 7 days, right? So we just put 7 in there. Then the third parameter it's asking for, and this is an optional parameter. You don't need to do this, but it's asking, hey, do we want to format this in any particular way? If we didn't use this, the date formatting gets a little, it's not super easy for a human to read. So we want to say like, okay, well, let's just make it human readable. Let's make it a little bit easier. So we're going to say we're going to start with the year, then the month, then the day. And we're going to put that in these single quotes. So that's what this expression is doing. And those are the parameters or tools that it needs to get its job done. It needs what date are we starting from, how many days are we adding to that date, and if you add a minus here, how many days are we subtracting from that date, if we want to do that. And then if you want to, we can also add a parameter for formatting that date. So now let's look at what that looks like in the system in our level 3. Okay, so we've got be sure to complete the customer onboarding by that date. So we're recording this on April 3rd. So 7 days from today is the 10th, right? So we've got it correct, and it's formatted in that year, month, day format that we defined in our settings, right? So those are the 3 different levels, and there are so many different expressions. So we're just using this one as our test, a very simple one, and just getting you familiar with how expressions work and what they are expecting. And what does it mean? What is an expression? You know, it's just a task to be done. What's a parameter? It's just the tools that action needs to get its job done. So that's all you really need there. Okay, so those are our 3 different levels of processes, and let's kind of bring it home now and recap. Okay, so now our recap. Let's go back to our tips and resources piece here. So assume your first build attempt will fail. You probably saw several failures in there as I was opening up those level 2 and level 3. Perfectly normal, perfectly acceptable. Eventually, obviously, you're going to want to troubleshoot those and make sure that you're getting consistent successes, but fully acceptable to be starting with failures out of the gate, right? Using error messages is how we fix those issues and troubleshoot those issues. Renaming those actions, that's what I was talking about when I was referencing steps from up above. I can rename and see those as a clear, obvious step on what I'm referring to. I can just see it at a glance, so I know this is the right step that I'm pulling the data from. That's where I want to be coming from. I don't have to guess or like go back through and waste time, basically. Test early, test often. We talked about that again. And if you have complex functionality, we didn't cover this, but just pull it out. Just pull that out, build it as its own process, make sure it works as a proof of concept, and then bring that back into your main process and incorporate it there. All right. Well, I hope this has been beneficial to you. I hope we've eased some of your worry, because I know not as a developer when they say no code or low code, that is from a developer's point of view. When you're not a developer, boy, that's a lot of code. It looks really daunting, and I hope that I've been able to assuage any fears or trepidation for using Power Automate. I hope you can build out some quick and easy notifications, because kind of everyone needs notifications. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining me. Goodbye.